the superintendent's report.
Good evening. I have a lot of reports tonight, so I will try to stop after each report to make sure if you have any questions I can answer them. So tonight I'll provide the board with financial information for the month of December, and this represents 6 months or 50% of the fiscal year. My report starts on board book page 14, and that's our monthly summary report. The total revenue for the month was $617,229, with 30% coming from evidence-based funding, which is state funding, and 35% coming from state and federal reimbursement, primarily for various things associated with special education, and then a very small portion for driver's ed and career and technical education. Additionally, the Township Treasurer's Office, in collaboration with IMET, recovered $58,451 for the district from the IMET fraud incident from 2015. IMET stands for Illinois Metropolitan Investment Fund, and as you know, the Township Treasurer does all of our investments on behalf of the district, and one of the funds they invested in was IMET. The Township Treasurer wasn't alone. There were many different municipalities and groups that invested in IMET. In any regard, IMET purchased fraudulent securities from a Florida-based company called First Farmers Financial, and this company marketed repurchased agreements as being backed by loans guaranteed by the United States Department of Agriculture. Obviously, those documents were falsified. And in that same year, the chief executive of the company was arrested and prosecuted. And then since then, IMET has been working to recover as much money as they can. So last year, the district recovered $12,493. And so in total with the money this year, we have recovered $70,944. This represents 39% of our total investment, which is $181,482. The Township Treasurer told us that they do anticipate the district receiving some additional money, but in Township Treasurer fashion, they couldn't tell us when or how much at this point. We also weren't notified that we should anticipate this money this year. So it was not budgeted for to answer one of the board's questions, and I don't know if we'll receive more money this year or if some additional money will come in the following year. Thank you. You're welcome. The total expenditures for the month were a little over $6 million, with 72% going towards debt service and 23% going towards salary and benefits. December is usually an anomaly because this is the month that we pay our principal and some interest for the district bonds, and then also in June we'll pay one more interest payment as well, but it's not nearly as significant as this. That's why the percentages are a little off this month for expenditures. Moving on, monthly financial statements. If you go to board book page 15, you can see our ending operating fund balance halfway through the year is $14.3 million, and that's in the blue row. This does include the $2.9 million that's set aside for field acquisition, so removing that amount would leave a balance of $11.4 million. Additionally, there's been a lot of talk about fund balance in the ed fund, yet the number being referenced in the fund balance is the operating fund. So I wanted to take a minute to point out the difference between those two, because I think people often interchange those and they're very different. So you can see on this page the current ed fund balance is $4,268,325. And then the operating fund balance includes a variety of funds. It includes the ed fund, the operation and maintenance fund, transportation, municipal retirement, and working cash. And all of those together is the fund balance of $14.3 million, or 11.4 without the reserve money for the field acquisition. This amount fluctuates throughout the year. Every time I present, that amount changes. And I have another report in a few minutes that I will show the board to kind of demonstrate how this fluctuates throughout the year. It's also important to point out on this page that in this month in the operating funds, we spent almost $2 million more than we took in with revenue. And that is because we're not receiving any tax payments now, so we don't have a ton of revenue coming in. And so we'll continue to spend down that reserve. But this month it was significant, so I wanted to be sure to point that out. That will likely happen in, maybe not as much, but it will likely happen in January and February as well.
So just looking at page 15, the first two columns, top right corner, revenue less expenditures. That $2 million, the 1.5 from the ed fund and the 532 from the operations fund. That $2 million, when we have to pay those bills, that comes out of the operating fund balance, right?
Correct, and it comes out of that particular fund. I think the other thing I was gonna highlight later, but I think the other thing that's important to note in this conversation is that these funds have very specific purposes, and you can't just transfer money around between these funds, with the exception of working cash. You can make transfers, but you can't transfer money out of the transportation fund to the ed fund to help pay for salaries if you should be short in that account. And so that's why it's really important to understand that the ed fund is separate from the operating funds, which are all the funds put together.
So the salaries come out of which fund?
The education fund.
And that's the unbalance, the one with the 4 million.
Correct.
Correct.
And
So
that-
just this month, or last month, December, we spent 11.9 million out of that account.
And
Is that accurate, or is that for the year?
No, that's for the year.
Okay.
But also, every time we pay salaries, we do also have to pay the support staff salaries, have IMRF associated with that, and that's Fund 50, as well as, Social Security, things of that nature. So every time, certainly salaries come out of the ed fund, but then we also have some expenditures that come out of Fund 50 and 51 as well.
So the ed fund is predominantly salaries, but what else would come out of our ed fund?
Really everything to operate the high school. So operation and maintenance is kind of that, kind of sums it up. It's the maintenance of the building, buildings and grounds.
Airmark's contract.
Airmark's contract is the biggest expenditure that comes out of there. The revenue that comes in also would be like the cell phone tower. Rentals goes in and out of operations and maintenance. But pretty much a majority of your revenues and expenditures are going through the ed fund. Transportation speaks for itself. That includes not just special ed, but field trips. It includes
going back.
athletics,
Athletic,
our minibus leases. So that includes transportation.
So then operation and maintenance, how is that? Because if Airmark comes out of education.
No, Airmark comes out of operations and maintenance.
Okay,
And we pay Airmark, we get a discount if we pay Airmark at the beginning of the year. And so we typically pay them at the beginning of the year because we would want to take advantage of that. The continuing charges for Airmark are when they come in for weekends and overtime, and that happens often in the winter for snow removal and things of that nature, as well as if we have weekend events.
There was that very helpful pie graph you had done when the budget was reviewed that kind of talked about the components of the ed fund versus operating and maintenance. Is that in here? Or I'm just,
It is not.
Okay.
It's online, though, with the budget.
On the budget.
Right. And 75 to 80% of the money in the education fund goes to salary and benefits. Correct, right?
Chris, why don't you get through the rest of the monthly financials and then go into that fund balance report, because I think that will help answer some questions.
Yes, that is.
Was there, I didn't receive any bills questions.
There are no bills.
I mean, the financial report questions. Did you have any other questions on this report?
They're not. Do you want me to skip to the historical operating fund balance?
Yes, if you could.
So that begins on page 29, because we're skipping through the statement of revenue and expenditures, which is just the report you see every month that compares budget to actual for each line. So if you look at board book page 29, once again, it's important to note we're talking about the operating funds, so all of those 5 funds put together. And this chart is helpful because it highlights how this fund balance changes each month as the revenues and expenditures are constantly changing. The official metric is evaluated on June 30th of each year because that's the official end of the fiscal year. And so that's why that column is highlighted in gray. I think some of the confusion that's been occurring lately is because people have been referencing different points in time. If you talk about where we are right now, that's gonna look very different than where we are gonna be or projected to be at June 30th, 2020. So you can see this previous June, the last fiscal year, we ended with a roughly 52%, or roughly having 6.3 months in reserves for operating. If we hit our target for this budget, we're projecting about a $400,000 deficit. Our fund balance at that point would be 48%. And that 48% does exclude the $2.9 million that we have set aside for field acquisition. And so I think, when people are referring to different fund balances and there's confusion, my interpretation of that has been that they're talking about different moments in time. And so that's why I think it's important to make sure that we're constantly trying to maybe refer to June 30th and where we're going to be at June 30th, because that is the official metric.
Sure, each one of these numbers is like a snapshot, right? And you can pull that out, but to tell the true story, you kind of have to look at over time.
Correct, and you can also tell, right, obviously, in the fall, we receive property taxes, so, our fund balance is gonna spike, and then we start spending all of that down because we don't have significant revenue, and then we get a little shot again in March when we get some more property tax, and then we continue to spend that down again.
Kristen, tell me if this analogy that I use is a fair one to use, or I should never think of it in my head again. When we are talking about, like, we're gonna be 400,000 in the rears, that's like our checking account. That's how we pay the daily operations of the school and sort of make this whole place run. The fund balance is sort of the savings account, the rainy day fund, shouldn't touch it unless there's an emergency. Is that a fair assessment of sort of the difference between the two of them? Or is it too general?
I would say the checking account is really just kind of how you've spent your money for the year and where you end up, because, right, in a checking account, you might have more money in that account, but yes.
It's maybe a checking account that feeds off of a savings account to keep it flush.
But at the end of the year, we're minus 400,000, we'll take that 400,000, because we're on a cash basis, out of the fund balance, and make it zero.
Yeah, I think what Ramona's analogy, I know who gave you that analogy, because they used that analogy when I worked for them a long time ago. Your working cash fund is like your savings account.
Okay.
Okay? So those four other funds, ed, operation, transportation, IMRF, are like their own checking accounts. So when you looked at page 15, when Kristen covered that, if we paid all our bills out of that ed fund, there's $4 million in there. There's the I don't have it in front of me. Marianne, go to page 15, please. You might have to blow it up so that people watching can see this a little better.
Or me. Well, I have it in front of me, but I can't see that. 14 or 15?
15. So your balance in your checkbook for the ed fund is the 4, your 1.2 in your operations, your 7 in your transportation, and your IMRF. If any of those go over, or there's a deficit, then you go into you can go into your working cash, which is like your savings or your rainy day fund. Okay, so the reason we had Kristen, if you go back to 29, if you follow this is January 1 of 2019, so last January through June 30th. What you'll see is this fluctuates, and this is where sometimes things can get off. If you look at July, our fund balance was 319%, right? But then you basically are using that money from July all the way through March. You see how that gets spent down. That's how you're paying all of your expenditures, transportation, ed fund, teacher salaries, right? You're running your district with that 319%. In March, you get an increase in tax collection. So you get your second installment of tax collection. That's why it goes back up to 88%. So it goes from 319 in July all the way down to 61% in February. Or excuse me, 319, it went all the way down. When it started in January, we were at 63, then it works its way down to the 50, and then it works its way back up. But what I'm trying to show you is there's 2 times where you get money in, and then the rest of those months, you're spending down that fund balance. So if you look at the fund balance in October, it could be definitely different than it was in August. And so that was why we wanted to show you a 12-month cycle of the fund balance. So at June 30, at the end of our fiscal year, we had 50% in the bank, or 6 months of operation in the bank. At the end of 2020, we're projecting that to be about 48%.
And that was the point I wanted to make, is that year over year, that 52%, that effectively means we have 6 months, all things, the state shuts down and stops paying us, we would have 6 months of reserves, if you will, right? But this number has dipped fairly low in the past when the state has been in a problematic place.
Yeah, Kristen, were you able to find that
Yes,
information?
in June 2020, we were at 26.62%.
June of 2012.
Sorry, 2012.
Okay.
Right.
Say that again?
In June 2012, we were at 26.62%. That was the year the state was not consistently making payments.
So that was
the biggest
after,
year they were.
that was after my
Sure.
first full year, and we didn't receive our fall tax collection till almost December. So
Right.
we were like, basically, almost having to do tax anticipation warrants.
Right.
And that's when, I'm glad you found the policy, the 412, the operating policy. That's where you see that we wanted to keep a fund balance of 33%, having dipped down so low.
Sure.
That's something that is set locally by boards. There is no state code that requires a particular fund balance. In doing some research, I have seen other local districts that have board policies at 50%. So it really is something that the board gets to do.
That's local control. That's our privy, right?
So if we end up, let's say, hypothetically, if we end up getting, the main line on your report here is the middle line, without the 2.95, right? Because the board specifically passed a resolution
Correct.
2 years ago that says that's for the field acquisition. Okay, so if we get the field acquisition, let's say, and to do the price of the project and to get the deal done, it's $3.5 million. That $600,000 has to come out of our working cash.
Correct.
So that would be another 2 or 3 percentage points right off the top of this fund balance. So if we're saying we're gonna be at roughly 48% June 30th of 2020, if we were able to get that deal done, we could be quickly to 45 or 44
Correct. And
if we needed additional money.
Correct, and then also, I will certainly update them because they do change from year to year, but last year when we did the financial projections, for a few years out, granted this was prior to negotiations, but we were projecting a deficit multiple years, so that fund balance will continue to be spent down as well.
Okay, so the only thing that, if I was watching this, the last few years, we've projected, the last year or two, we projected small deficits, we came in with a surplus. But is some of that just timing, because we got tax collection dollars after July 1st? So, I mean, so it wasn't put in June, like,
Yeah, I'm not prepared to answer that. I believe that was the case 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago. It wasn't the case in fiscal year 19. But certainly, a budget is a best guess. Often when you're creating a budget, you don't have, for a school, especially a school in Cook County, you don't have a lot of the information. And then there are also unknowns, either both on the revenue side and expenditure side, or just one or the other. Like, for example, the IMET, that was almost $60,000 in revenue that no one was anticipating ever receiving this year. So things can happen like that on the revenue side, and we can have a swing for surplus, but we also need to be prepared that things can happen on the expenditure side too, or that we don't hit revenues.
so let's say the state only makes 2 payments and we get our 3rd payment July 5th. Our deficit, we could finish this fiscal year
Our deficit would be-
significantly larger.
Correct.
Because, all right, we've had it where the state's issued a payment and the township treasurer's office closed and they don't reconcile that payment till after July 4th, right? Okay. So at the end of the day, we have roughly 6 months of operating expenses in reserves. That's what we're saying we should be around this year when we finish our fiscal year, between 48 and 50%.
Correct.
Okay.
what impact, I know we've also been kind of gearing up for the pension liability to come down on us. So where would that impact us in the budget? So if we have to assume more responsibility, where is that going to hit?
So that would come out of our educational fund, because all of our TRS payments are coming out of our educational fund.
So then our fund balance could be,
Yes,
Take a hit.
Ultimately, that
Negatively
goes,
impacted.
yes,
Yes.
ultimately
It would be
that
greatly
feeds
impacted.
into our operating fund balance, so that would take, yes.
Now, we wouldn't anticipate, I mean, the discussion of all this different legislation that gets proposed, it's always talked about being phased in, so you would, the idea would be that it would be phased in and you would have a fiscal year to plan for it, so we would know in advance. They wouldn't just tell you in March, hey, starting in April, you're paying your TRS payment, right? It's so, it would impact our future budget if it started to come down, but it's still on the table.
because I know we've been talking about that for a couple of years, and I think that is another reason why we want to keep our fund balance more healthy.
Yeah, I don't see 50% as being like overly healthy. I mean, I think it's a good fund balance that we have 6 months in reserves. But I mean, if, a board member submitted a question about the school report card, like our evidence-based funding, the state only has us at a financial capacity to meet 73% of expectations. So it's not like we're a cash flush district. Some of our neighbors in high school and elementary districts are sitting at 120%. We have an EBF number of a 74%. So it's not like we're a cash flush district, and those districts get minimal increases in funding. We continue to get larger increases each year of the evidence-based funding model. This year we received like an additional 75 to 80,000, close to that.
Yeah, but I would say that if you look at Advanced Illinois' report and the disparity, right? So the state has put all of its eggs in the K-12 basket. When you look at on page 6 of that Advanced Illinois report, you see that there is no additional monies, like if you think of the piece of the pie as finite. So unless the state comes up with some really huge revenue sources, like increasing taxes or gaming comes through in a big way, right? They've put no money in pre-K and higher ed has tanked. And so in my opinion, evidence-based funding in this state is not sustainable. And we also know that at least, and this is an old statistic, so it could be, I think it's higher now, but for every dollar you put in pre-K, you save 8 by the time they graduate 12th grade. And they're putting no money in pre-K. They've put all of their eggs in the K-12 basket, and there's no way that that is sustainable. So if you think evidence-based funding is some panacea that's going to save education in this state, you are sadly, sadly mistaken. Advance Illinois report. I will send you all the links so you can look at it. It is a very well-done report by some really good stakeholders in this state. I encourage everybody that's listening to look at it as well, but evidence-based funding is not going to save this state, and it's not going to save education in this state. So.
I have heard a variety of people express that concern that Illinois is not going to be able to sustain that and that it won't be fully funded because they won't be able to budget for that. So that is certainly a concern moving forward.
So one of the things we've talked about in the last, over the last years, and particularly looked at numbers in the last 4 or 5 years, is the increase in running the school, the increased cost, i.e. textbooks have gone up 80%. Our IT costs have gone up 70, 80%. Transportation has gone up 75%. Special ed has gone up over 100% in 4 years. Those numbers, they worry me. Where is it going to be in the next 4 years or 5 years? If the trend is 80 to 100%, 5 years, and we're not getting any more money, the money we get basically goes, the CPI, again, goes right to, it's gone to the teachers. It's where we've spent that money the last 5 years, and that's warranted. I don't have an issue with that at all. But the rest of the school is becoming more expensive.
I think, as we have these discussions, I've said this last year, I'll say this again this year. Kristen, this is an excellent job putting this report together. Hopefully this will, I know you'll post this online. I think we need to take a deep breath, and I will go back to the presentation I gave to the board last year around this time. We have projected some small deficits going forward for the next few years. We have a sufficient fund balance to help manage that without, as long as we don't receive any, side punches or surprise punches from the state, whether it's with EBF funding or cost shift in pensions. That being said, I do not think we're cash flush, or we should be changing the practices we have put in place over the last several years to help get to this position. Now, we heard presentation tonight. Do we maybe need to consider increasing social work services? Can the district afford to do that? Absolutely. We've had some talk in the past, like, do we need to look at how we staff our chem and honors chem because they're working with chemicals and Bunsen burners and things? If we needed to do an additional 0.2 or lower that cap, like, there's enough to plug and play for the next couple years. I would not encourage you to say, let's open the floodgates, that's not sustainable, that's not recommended. Do we have the reserves and the financial withal to make sure we can attack certain areas if we recognize needs or deficiencies? Yes, we can. But we have to still do this at a conservative pace so that we can sustain
That's the word, sustain.
those additions, but also don't put us in a position where we were in 2012, 2013, where we were cutting everything, right? So what we have done over the last 6 or 7 years of my tenure is we've slowly brought things back. We started with the freshman class and we went 25-1 or 27-1. We went down from 30. Then we added the sophomore class. Then we added the junior class. We did the 1-to-1, 1 year at a time. Most schools will go all in within 2 years. We did it at a slower pace so that we can sustain it, so the fees and the costs can kind of balance each other out. I would encourage us to continue to take a similar approach.
So, and maybe it's time to start the conversation. There's one unpleasant one, but something we probably should think about, where we start to have hard caps. If we say that we want to start to hold finances at a certain place, some classes, as soon as they fill up, that's it. There's a hard cap on it. In that way, we don't get in a position where we are overcrowded, and it would be, by priority registration. And if somebody drops, the next person can have the class. I mean, that happens in colleges and it happens in smaller schools. We're one school district. And it's not popular, but to look at spending, and this way we never have a student in an awkward position. It's just the class is capped. And another conversation we might want to start to have is freeing up some space by allowing students who don't want the 7 hour. Because right now most of our students are here for 7 hours. But we could have some seniors or who say that maybe that have enough credits, and that was another conversation. We require more credits than the state requires to graduate. Maybe somebody says, I just want to take a class at Triton my second half of my senior year, and they can. They can go there, or I just want to work and start saving up for college, and I don't want to take extra that last hour my senior year. I want to spend my senior year and start making money for school. That would also free up some space.
We do have, when I got here, they had discontinued that. We have re-implemented that. There is early release available for juniors and seniors. They have to qualify for it by maintaining good grades and having good attendance, but we do have that. The historical culture here is a lot of kids take 7 classes. We have done Ms. Augustine and Ms. Lindquist have done a good job of implementing in the curriculum guide, and we did a couple parent, education, informational things nights this past fall about the dual credit and the opportunity to arrange your schedule so that you can fulfill your elective requirements while doing dual enrollment at Triton. We aren't seeing the number of students take advantage of that opportunity that we would like to, but the things you are suggesting are already in place. I don't know if it's a lack of knowledge. We've tried to increase communication on that this year with Hector and his team. So those things are in place. They're maybe not being taken advantage of as much as we think.
Maybe if they capped the class, they couldn't get in, they'd early release.
Well, because for so long we didn't have it, so
Right.
the assumption might be that it just doesn't exist still, or, but I'm glad to hear that that option is there.
We do also cap and close elective classes. It's hard to do for graduation requirements, but we certainly do that for elective classes if they are full. And then to your point about, going to Triton a semester early, it varies on the year, but we have seen an increased number of students typically at the senior year that will graduate early. And that number can vary. Beth usually reports out on that, but it's usually somewhere around, 13, 15, something like that.
Are students allowed to double dip their last semester? Are they able to pick up one class at Triton while finishing high school?
They could do that junior and
That's their
senior year.
too.
But
It's hard
that's
for
what I was saying, we're not
transportation.
getting students to take advantage of that as much as, because we're a single school district, we have limited elective opportunities, that's what we're trying to expand our catalog so that students realize that you can maybe get certified CNH training or criminal justice, or besides the advanced auto program that we go up to like a level 2, you can take the 3 and 4 at Triton and we'll count it towards your elective credit here. We don't have students taking this advantage of that. They can
So-
do that junior or senior year.
Yeah, I don't think they quite, it's not in their working knowledge, so to speak, or somebody who's taking a highly technical, going into engineering school. It'd be great to know that my senior year, I can take one less class here and get one of those electives taken off so I can have a lighter load when I start freshman year. I mean, I don't know that we have enough experience doing that and enough students sharing that experience.
We had only like 2 last year.
Right, so
And
as.
one we stumbled upon, a kid was doing it on his own.
Yeah. So I think as that message gets out, if you have a rigorous college schedule coming up, you could pick up some of those electives your senior year at Triton for less money.
Is that something counselors share, though, when the kids meet with them?
It's written in our curriculum guide. We did a specific parent presentation on dual enrollment and dual credit this October. I've talked with Kylie and Beth about advertising that more because the trend in the state of Illinois is trying to push more career and tech ed exploration, college and career readiness. And so the trend, even in public education across the country, is trying to push more dual enrollment, dual credit, not just AP for the high flyers, but dual credit, dual enrollment, so that kids can graduate not only with, the goal should be not only graduating with a high school diploma, but close to your associates. What I think in my tenure here, we have this meeting all the time at Triton, and Chris and I have worked on it. I'm actually working on our Triton agreement now for dual credit and dual enrollment. I think our issue is it's not an easy commute to get down First Avenue to go to Triton. And over 800 of our students are involved in after-school extracurriculars. So it's not exactly easy to where I can leave RB at 12:30, go to Triton, take 2 classes, and make it back for a practice, or make it back for my club, right? So it just doesn't necessarily work for them, so they end up just taking classes here or, doing things like that. We have tried to figure out where the roadblocks are coming. That's something that Beth's working on. We're working with our career and tech ed people to try to figure out where the roadblocks are coming. The other issue is the way that the government and the legislation is set up with the junior colleges, community college association. It's tough for some of our teachers to get be considered certified to teach dual credit, because at the junior college level you have to have a master's in your content area, where almost all of our teachers, a significant portion of our teachers have masters, but if they're not a master's in necessarily English or autos, it's hard for the university to issue, Triton or the community college to issue a dual credit because it's not necessarily under their requirements. So the high school superintendents have been working hard with the Community College Association to try to get some of that to become a little more easier so that we can offer more dual credit here if we had larger classes to do it.
But even in addition to dual credit, if we look at our credit requirements, most of our students graduate with more credits than they need to graduate.
Absolutely.
So they can
Sure.
not get dual credit, they can just get credit for a course at Triton.
Dual enrollment, yes.
It's called dual enrollment, yes.
Right. And I don't believe that that is in their working knowledge, thinking about, oh, I can be at high school and I can simultaneously be enrolled at Triton and take care of an elective. Where that elective does not count for high school, but I have more credits than I need for high school, but that credit will count for next year's college. I don't believe that all our students understand that.
Right, we've sent out a bunch of communications and we will continue to work on that.
So I think we
Yeah,
could
I
have
wonder if
some
some of the-
communication work there.
Right, some of the discussion that was also about what those requirements are, I think, for the hours you need, right? Whether it's in the fine arts or in the PE, and how those are structured to allow you flexibility to do the dual enrollment. I think that's, should be part of the larger discussion in terms of how to best allocate resources, I think.
And there are, the way that our policy is written, it does give the principal and superintendent some flexibility to waive some of those requirements if there's a different course or a dual enrollment course being taken. So we do have some flexibility built into our policy, but it could result in, we've talked about this before, of looking at our graduation requirements and our number of elective requirements and some of that stuff.
And some of that would mean maybe we have to have the difficult conversation to let go of some things and allow our students to make decisions on their own, our families, and not feel that we have to control everything that they take here. And allow them that option to say, I'm going to college, I want to take some things off my plate this year, so I'm ready for college next year. But then that will open up some area here.